My name is Riley Chow, and I'm here with Luca Giliberti and Kevin Jacobsen, and we're going to be talking about the Emmy races for Supporting Actress and Supporting Actor in a Limited Series or Movie. This year, one of the big contenders for Limited Series is Mrs. America, and they have, I believe, 7 supporting actresses who each get a very strong showcase. Luca, will we see all of them nominated?
At the moment, I have 4 of them nominated. We could easily see them run this category. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Mrs. America came out at the perfect time. It'll be top of mind for voters. And the performances these actresses give on the show, since they get these spot episodes, I feel like voters will definitely take to them. They're also, most of them or all of them are very well known by the industry, so that could help as well. And it's very difficult to narrow it down to just 4, even though 4 out of 6 slots is still a lot. But who I have in at the moment is Sarah Paulson, Rose Byrne, Margot Martindale, and Uzo Aduba. Sarah Paulson gets her spotlight episode in the 8th episode. If voters watch that far, I do not see how she misses. It's a spectacular performance. Rose Byrne is someone who was thoroughly great throughout the season. She plays the most, I guess, the role is that could definitely benefit her. Margot Martindale is someone I was not confident in earlier on, but she gets so many great episodes toward the end. And she's Margot Martindale. She's won 2 Emmys for being in Mere Minutes of the Americans. So I don't see why she wouldn't get in here for the role, for this role. And finally, I have Uzo Aduba, another Emmy favorite, who could benefit from being at the beginning of the ballot, who could benefit from just the character she plays and the importance that character has right now at the moment. She disappears in the second half of the season, or she doesn't completely disappear, but she doesn't appear as often as she did in the first half, which is also why I took out Tracey Ullman for that same reason. And it was a difficult decision between the two. So that's where I stand with Miss America.
Yeah, we're each predicting 4 nominees from that show in this category, but we all have different combinations. Kevin is even missing eventual winner, Sarah Paulson.
Yes, I am. Yes, that is my sort of a no guts, no glory prediction of at least this genre. The reason I have that the way it is because I think there are going to be 4 of them, because we also have Jean Smart and Toni Collette, who are presumably going to be in. And so I think at most there will be 4. I would assume so, but we could talk about it. I think just to say who I think is pretty strongly in, I think Rose Byrne is so present throughout the season and is more or less a second lead, as close as you could come to that. And playing such an iconic person as Gloria Steinem, I think that is easily going to be in for her. And then with Margot Martindale, I mean, she can win for drinking a cup of coffee at a coffee table, so she can get nominated for having a hot dog on a sidewalk. So, I think she's so beloved and is such a bold and just, it's just classic Emmy bait, I think, that kind of a role. And Uzo Aduba she gets the spotlight in that 3rd episode. She is at the top of the ballot, which does, I think, play a factor, and is clearly an Emmy darling herself. She has already won multiple Emmys. She's gotten nominated for Orange is the New Black, past the point that people cared about that show very much. And so I think those 3 are pretty solidly in. And I added in Tracey Ullman very recently in place of Sarah Paulson. And that is because I just wonder how much the voters have seen the show, because I specifically remember getting to about the halfway point of Mrs. America, and there were multiple people I know who were saying, I don't know why Sarah Paulson took this role, because she's not given anything to do.
Yeah, I think we were all thinking that at the halfway point.
Yeah, so I don't know how much voters are going to have watched the entire thing enough to have watched that second to last episode there. And so that is just my no guts, no glory thing there. And to predict Tracey Ullman, she does get the showcase in the 4th episode,
yes.
which is early on, and is playing another very bold and loud character, and is clearly an Emmy favorite dating back decades, who all of her shows tend to get nominated to begin with. So she is an Emmy favorite, I think, as much as Sarah Paulson has been recently. But
I also like the narrative of Tracey Ullman getting the nomination, about how, you know, there were those interviews that she did where she said that she had to really fight to get this role. So
yeah,
this is
right.
kind of a comeback, I guess.
Yeah.
And
I feel like I will probably be wrong on that, just because of how much love there is in this industry for Sarah Paulson. But I just look at the field and I'm like, there's so many favorites in that cast that how are you going to say which one is more of a favorite than the other?
I think, as you mentioned, it just really depends on whether they watched until the very end. I'm going on. My prediction sort of entails that they have watched it until the very end, because I think if they did, I think it's very difficult to not nominate Sarah Paulson, just because of the showcase she gets and just that character and what the character is trying to represent. I think that, and we should mention, it's a fictional character, and that sort of allowed them to do things with that character that sort of resulted in such a showcase episode for Sarah Paulson. And I think what you mentioned, Kevin, is very important, is that she's recently been an Emmy favorite, as in the last decade. She's been nominated. She's received all of her nominations. And I feel like that could help her as well. But we may just see 5 Mrs. America women get in. There's no reason why that shouldn't happen. For me, it's because I'm predicting 2 other people in this race, which would be Jean Smart and Toni Collette. That's the reason why I don't see 5 Mrs. America women getting in.
Yeah, like I don't have Margot Martindale, but it's pretty clear that we are talking about the same 5 from the Mrs. America cast, and I don't think we'd be really surprised if any of them were the one who missed. And like the reason why I'm predicting so many is because of the balloting system that the Emmys have used in the last few years, where you're not limited to picking only 6 people in this category because there are 6 nomination slots. So if you're a fan of Mrs. America who has watched the whole show and you're seeing these 5 people, it's pretty hard to justify, I think, not voting for them, given that these are such capable actresses and they do get such showcase episodes. Given that Mrs. America is hitting at the right time and we expect it to be such a big player, I'm assuming that everybody watches it. So I think that it's a top priority in this category, and we could see these 5 women checked off before they start considering things like, Bad Education or Unbelievable or even Watchmen, aired like quite a while ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's also very difficult because these are the Mrs. America women. They are such respected people in the industry. It's not like if you compare to something like American Crime Story Versace, where we have the supporting actor race, where we also had several actors that could have gotten in, but they went for Ricky Martin, Edgar Ramirez, and Finn Wittrock, but they didn't nominate Cody Fern, who was also given this huge spotlight, but he was lesser known than the other 3. I don't feel like we have that situation here, which makes it so difficult. I wouldn't even be surprised to see one like Elizabeth Banks get in. She also has an episode. She's not in much of the season outside of her own episode, but she's also someone who's been nominated for Emmys before. Recently, so I wouldn't even be surprised.
Yeah,
what did you?
They could get all 6, right?
I mean, it's very
possible.
It's very possible, but I feel too confident in Toni Collette for Unbelievable. I don't see how she misses. She's been nominated for everything so far, for a Globe, for a Critics' Choice, for a SAG nomination in a category that combines lead and supporting performances. Yes, SAG gravitates toward bigger movie stars, which I'm guessing very much helped her because her co-stars were not nominated. But I do not see how you're going to check off Merritt Wever and possibly Caitlin Dever in actress and then not check off Toni Collette here. Her performance is not loud or flashy or showy, I guess, but I still feel like within the show, she does, next maybe Caitlin Dever, give the showiest performance. And it's just very difficult for me to see her miss here, which is why, and I think she can easily capitalize on these Mrs. America women getting in when it comes to the win, because we have 4 Mrs. America women and her and possibly Jean Smart. I think Toni Collette walks away with this pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a clear, this is the person we go for Mrs. America. I think they all have pros and cons. I mean, even going back to the nominations in general, I think someone like Rose Byrne, who, like I said, is having that second lead sort of presence throughout the season and is playing an iconic character. I mean, you look at all of the other people in contention there, and Margot Martindale, Uzo Aduba, Tracey Ullman, Sarah Paulson are all clearly Emmy favorites more than she is, who only got it for 2 seasons of Damages. Not that she does a lot of TV, but still, I don't know if there's been a lot of awards love for Rose Byrne in general. And it is, as much as it is showy in the physical traits and the mannerisms, I don't know if it's outwardly showy enough compared to some of these others who are so loud and boisterous.
I would say Rose Byrne, her performance is a bit more divisive than these other ones, but she definitely has more screen time, and she's playing a more famous person. And she,
absolutely.
Okay, well, I'll say that my hot take is that Toni Collette is getting snubbed. She is the front runner in Gold Derby's odds, but, you know, like Luca is saying, you know, if they're checking off Unbelievable and Merritt Wever, the thing is, though, is that they're checking off Cate Blanchett and Mrs. America first. So I think right away, you know, she falls to 5th, I guess, at least, because of all these Mrs. America women who are getting in. And from there, you know, I look at Toni Collette versus Jean Smart, and they're both, you know, beloved actresses giving these performances that have picked up awards already at the same ceremony, in fact, at the Critics' Choice Awards. So if I'm comparing those two, I say, again, Watchmen is better positioned than Unbelievable. So if it comes down to Jean Smart versus Toni Collette, then I'll go with Jean Smart. And finally, the other person that I'm really considering in this category is Allison Janney for Bad Education. Allison Janney in Bad Education is a clearly supporting performance. She doesn't get a showcase like many of these other women, nor is she a co-lead like Toni Collette. But Bad Education was, I would say, surprisingly well received, and it aired very recently. She has more name recognition than Toni Collette as well, so I feel like she's got enough buzz right now.
I did not. Yeah, it is. It makes a whole lot of sense, especially if Mrs. America really is this extreme priority here, as in it gets in more than 4 slots. And even if it just gets in 4 slots, then there's the whole Allison Janney factor, who, as we know, she gets in so many times. She's an Emmy darling. Again, here though, my reasoning for not predicting her is the fact that she's contending for a TV movie that, yes, was well received. Her performance was well received. But when you're facing a limited series that is well positioned to be in the top 3, I think it's very difficult to edge out a performer from that limited series, especially when that is Toni Collette, who has been able to get all these nominations leading up to the Emmys, who gives a performance that a lot of people still absolutely love, plays a character that people love, a character you very much root for when you watch the show. And that's why I cannot see Toni Collette missing at the moment, but I'd be lying. And I said this a few months ago, if I wasn't a tiny bit worried about her. But I think as I said, if she gets in and 4 Mrs. America women get in, and then I think the win is between her and, I don't know if Jean Smart, her performance was also very acclaimed. When she appeared in that 3rd episode, everyone was talking about it. But I think if it's between her and Toni Collette, I would give Toni Collette the edge for the win.
I would agree on that. But yeah, I mean, the Allison Janney factor is very strong, and
Right.
she gets nominated almost for any project that she is in, especially at the Emmys. And so, you know, if Mrs. America didn't exist, she would have no problem getting into this field. The issue is
Right.
just taking up so much space that she might just be that seventh place person
Right.
that just misses out. And I do think that there is a hierarchy there, with limited series being a lot more valued than TV movies at this point. Especially, we've seen that over the past few years, that some TV movie performances, there's just none that are even acknowledged in an entire year. So I think that's unfortunately going to be the case for her, because yeah, I mean, I do think that's honestly one of her best performances, and some have even said it's even better than I, Tanya. So, you know,
Right.
I think she did have a lot of acclaim for that performance. It's just, if there were 7 slots, I would feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah, and it's very unlikely that we'll have 7 slots, because in the last 5 years, the most submissions that we've ever had, in the last 5 years, the most submissions that we've had is 105. And to trigger a 7th slot, you need 161 submissions, which is just not going to happen this year, especially with all these shows that fell off at the last minute, from The Third Day to The Undoing to Fargo to Genius.
Right. I guess we should mention that in our odds, Allison Janney is still comfortably in. She's actually in 5th place.
Oh, really?
And in 6th place is actually Patti Lupone for Hollywood, while Sarah Paulson is actually in 7th. Hollywood, again, I think it very much depends on whether voters are going to go for this. I think if it gets into limited series, I would be surprised not to see it get at least 1 nomination here. We have Patti Lupone and Holland Taylor, 2 very respected actors. Again, I mean, this entire race is full of respected industry vets, but again, I feel more confident in Mrs. America, Unbelievable, and Watchmen, and even probably Bad Education, but she's someone, or both of them are 2 we should just look out for. And I think of all performances on that show, I feel like Patti Lupone and Holland Taylor have been singled out quite a few times, so we should probably keep them on our radar.
All right, let's jump over to supporting actor. Supporting actor, we only have 1 Mrs. America actor, so there's lots of possibilities here. In the top 6 in Gold Derby's odds, we have Jim Parsons, Joe Mantello, and Darren Criss for Hollywood. And then we have John Slattery for Mrs. America, and John Turturro for The Plot Against America, and also Tim Blake Nelson for Watchmen. And that is not the order that they're in, but those are the 6. Yeah, Kevin, start us off.
I'm not entirely sure where the Darren Criss support is coming from. I mean, obviously he had his Emmy win a few years ago, but I don't think that was a role that was particularly showy enough to possibly get in. But if he still has some of that afterglow, and if he does have that kind of support within the industry, then I suppose it's possible. I just think Jim Parsons and Joe Mantello are going to clearly be the representatives for Hollywood in this category. And I guess since we're looking at all acting categories, probably the only representatives for Hollywood, at least in terms of my predictions. That I don't really see it getting 3. But yeah, I think John Slattery will definitely benefit from just being the only man in this category. I think he's the only man who is submitted in supporting actor, right?
He's the only one who's eligible.
Well, yeah, there you go. Yeah, so top 2 contender, arguably, and he could easily get in. He got many nominations for Mad Men back in the day. I feel pretty solid about that. Tim Blake Nelson, again, I think is one of those great character actors who tends to get into this category quite often. Not him specifically, but that type of actor. And is playing another very showy role in Watchmen and is a top 2 contender. I'm a little uncertain about John Turturro for The Plot Against America. He recently got in for The Night of course, but it's a David Simon show, so I don't know about that. but I suppose it's possible. My personal prediction that I'm going with is Yahya Abdul-Mateen II from Watchmen, because number one, he will be at the top of the ballot. Always important. And if a voter is starting off their supporting actor thing and they don't know where to start, he's right there at the top, playing a very memorable character, especially if voters watch the latter half of the series. Is very, very, it was a very, very buzzed about performance for many different reasons. And so that's kind of rounding out my bottom there, but this is another category where I have no idea who the front runner is, and I don't even really know if there is a proper lock among this group.
Yeah, this is definitely one where you can have a lot of fun with, I think. Throw whoever in you want.
And I did.
Yeah, I agree, Kevin, with your prediction of Yahya. I also have him in. Technically, Watchmen could get many nominations in this category. There are several actors who are in contention. I feel like Tim Blake Nelson is who everyone has in their lineup if they had to just choose one actor from the show. But there are so many others that could get in. And realistically, there's no reason why they shouldn't if Watchmen is going to be this priority in limited series, which I think it will definitely be. It could even win limited series. I feel like it's reached a relevancy that it didn't. Yes, it was always relevant, but especially right now, I feel that will benefit the show everywhere. If you have a limited series that is that strong, I feel like it's realistic to predict it to get a lot of acting nominations, which is also why, and I really do not feel confident in this prediction, and I could easily just take him out any moment. I did put Eric Lang in for Unbelievable. He has a very small part, and he is playing a cop who does not believe the rape victim in the first episode, which may not sit well with voters at the moment, but there is still the chance that they can separate fiction from reality. So he's also someone who could have gotten in last year for Escape at Dannemora, but there was just too much competition from When They See Us and Chernobyl and many other shows. So that might have been, and he was not the priority for Escape at Dannemora in that category, that which is why I put him in now, because I feel like Unbelievable is safer than The Plot Against America. It's safer than Hollywood. And I feel like he still gives a great performance in this, even though it's very subtle. It's not a big role. And even though he is playing a cop that doesn't believe the victim at the beginning, his character develops, and by the end he's apologizing to Caitlin Deaver's character. But as I said, I don't feel very confident in that prediction.
I think that's quite a description of the material that he has, but he absolutely should have been nominated last year. And yeah, this is a very open category. I could see him getting a nomination along the lines of Adina Porter for American Horror Story a few years ago, where she had a lot to do one season. The next season didn't really have anything to do, and then we saw her get nominated just because the field was kind of open. Maybe people were catching up on her past work as well. So yeah, you could, in terms of Watchmen, it does help a bit that they're not submitting Don Johnson. Opens up the field a bit for their other contenders. I finally added Tim Blake Nelson to my predictions. I feel like I get a bad feeling that he is a character actor, and those sometimes do get finally recognized in these categories, but other times I feel like they just keep getting taken for granted, like let's say Eric Lang last year. Watchmen is also a show where I am continually surprised, I think, by how well it has been received by the industry. So I wonder if there is going to be a line at some point where it doesn't connect with the acting branch beyond Regina King, for example.
I would definitely agree with that. I think the only reason why it might be able to overcome is maybe the wrong word, but the only reason that might not manifest this year, if it doesn't have that much acting support, is because there is a lot of competition, but we don't have a lot of limited series contenders contending here. I mean, I have Hollywood in limited series, but many people do not. So it's also another show that could completely run this category. We have so many actors from that show eligible, and I feel like that. But we do have Darren Criss, we do have Dylan McDermott. The show could get 4 nominations, and I just think it's very difficult to tell whether it is, and that's where I currently stand.
Yeah, so I slotted in Tim Blake Nelson finally, and he jumped all the way to first because that's the way this category is. I feel like there's not a lot of distance between first and seventh. I also have Michael Sheen in for Quiz. Sometimes these British shows, you're able to get people in, especially in these above the line categories. Michael Sheen, I feel like, is also due for a nomination. It's been quite some time since he was nominated last, but he has been kind of consistently turning up on television and giving, at least solid performances. Quiz is airing right now, even though it's not really getting much conversation in the United States. And it is a well-received show.
Right.
Someone
I think. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I also have Jesse Plemons for El Camino. He was nominated for the Critics' Choice Award. I do not have Aaron Paul because, like I said, I feel like he has been amply awarded and people are aware of that. Whereas Jesse Plemons, he has been getting nominations in recent years, and I feel like he is still in that kind of discovery phase where people feel like, let's support this guy for doing good work. And this is the role that I would say is most iconic for him, that he has not been nominated for at this point.
And he got a Critics' Choice nomination for it, even though Aaron Paul, for example, didn't. So he's someone I would definitely keep an eye out for. I think he could easily get in, even if Aaron Paul does not get into the lead actor race. I guess someone else we should mention is Titus Burgess for the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt special. He's obviously been nominated so many times for his role on that show. And if voters still, again, since they already know this role, they know this show, they're familiar with it, maybe they just check him off. He has never won for it. I feel like he's always been someone people have wanted to win, but he's never really managed to. So maybe that's something that helps him as well. He's someone who could definitely get in, but except for that, I think it becomes very difficult to see anyone else getting in. There's also J.K. Simmons, I guess, for Defending Jacob, but I feel like that might be a bit of a reach. He's great in it, but he's also in very little of it. And this is one of the most unpredictable races again, because I feel like it would be so much easier if we had more Mrs. America supporting actors. I feel like this race would be much easier to predict.
Another person is Robert Forster for El Camino.
Yeah.
He recently died. I'm not sure how many of the newer Academy voters are necessarily familiar with his work, so that's holding me back, as is how I'm not predicting Aaron Paul, so it would be kind of strange to predict multiple supporting actors in the same category. Having said that, I am predicting multiple Hollywood supporting actors, and I'm not even predicting the show for a program nomination. So he can certainly happen. We also have Amit Rahab for Unorthodox. Unorthodox could be nominated for series. It could be nominated for lead actress. So why not nominate her husband?
Absolutely.
Another just random person that I think could surprisingly sneak in just for being in one of those top 2 shows is Louis Gossett Jr. for Watchmen. And he has a pretty sizable supporting part that I think is quite memorable. And he is an Oscar winner. He's been in the business for a long time. I could see that happening.
Absolutely.
If they really go for Watchmen.
Yeah. That's what I was mentioning earlier, is that realistically, if you're in a strong limited series contender, that should certainly up your chances here in these races, because that's just what has happened recently with this new voting system. Look at When They See Us last year. The show was probably in the top 2, top 3 for Best Limited Series, and it managed to get 8 acting nominations, and we didn't expect many of those actors to get in. And I think Watchmen could absolutely be in the same situation. I do agree with Riley, though, is that there is sort of some doubt whether it's a show the actors will go for outside of Regina King. So that's something we we'll definitely have to consider.
Yeah, they also have Jovan Adepo. I feel like he's kind of one of those Julia Garner, Rachel Brosnahan types, where I feel like I keep seeing him pop up in all these prestige shows.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he could get a nomination for that, and also for how he is, the focus of that 6th episode that was so acclaimed.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and then finally, I would like to mention Ray Romano for Bad Education, because Bad Education, I feel like, has been widely seen by the Academy at this point, and I feel like everyone actually liked that performance. I think the issue is just that there is not more of it.
Yes.
And he's also someone who has really randomly kind of had this resurgence of respect. He was in The Irishman, The Big Sick, obviously. There's just been kind of this random resurgence of great respect for Ray Romano that, sure, I could see that absolutely surprising on nomination boarding.